And welcome to the Meet the Eatmons Endangered Species podcast. We're your hosts, Curtis and Spring Eatman, and we're so excited to be here today. This is where we get to inform, inspire, and uplift leaders and individuals and families who are doing something that stands out in today's world. And today we're going to be talking about a really important topic about parenting and families and children and all the good things. So today's going to be exciting.
It is. Strengthening the core to the relationship for family success is what we're going to call this one, right? So, I think specifically if you are a parent or maybe you are want to position yourself to be a parent one day, I believe this podcast is going to help you tremendously set yourself up for success, right?
Yes. So we have a very unique parenting perspective because we have a little bit of everything. So at one point I was a single mother. We have blended family, parenting as blended family. And then we have the traditional children that we parent as mother and father of both of them. And so there's a lot of different perspectives that we can cover on this topic when it comes to parenting while dating, parenting while married, having kids while you have kids, blending the family together, the bridge babies, and, how to connect everybody and make sure everybody's feeling included and loved and not left out and all of those things.
And also parenting from your perspective of how you were raised, because I come from a two-parent home, right? And you were raised from single parents, so there's also a different perspective of how you I guess you would say created your principles and values of how you're going to parent as well. I think that's going to help a lot of people. And then I'm a man, obviously, so we're more tough love usually when it comes to parenting. You're a woman, so you might give a perspective of nurturing.
I don't know about that. I feel like it's a little opposite. I feel like moms are usually more of the tough love parents, and the fathers are more of the let me hug my baby, especially when it's a girl.
It's a girl,
100%
my baby
girl.
Yeah,
you do nothing wrong.
They can't. Of course not. Got me wrapped. I'm good.
I feel like
my son? Oh yeah.
Moms are more of the disciplinary, and the dads are like the backup who hold me back, but nobody's there. Hold me back.
I just want to be fun dad. That's all I want to do. I'll come home and amusement park dad. Just have fun.
Exactly.
Right?
Disneyland dad, right?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
So let's get into it. We got 5 segments we're going to talk about specifically on this topic. And if you haven't followed us on social media yet, please look on the screen. You'll be able to see different links there for both of us, and also Meet the Eatmans just in general. And for anyone that that could benefit from the content we're about to share, please don't let this just stay with you. Go ahead and like, share, and subscribe as well if you haven't already. So let's get right into today's discussion. Is that cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So first thing I really want to talk about is, should parenting be divided 50-50, or do natural strengths justify imbalance?
I think natural strengths. I think that there's definitely a 50-50 input. You have to have these conversations. I know we start every single topic talking about communication, but I feel like that is one of the bases that is the most important in every area of any type of relationship. And so you have to communicate and know what each other's strengths are and what your parenting styles are. Because if I'm a super gentle parent and he's a, spare the rod, spoil the child, we are going to have some difficulty in moving forward. And so it's better for us to kind of identify and know that up front so that we can navigate and maybe find a third option that makes sense for both of us. And so I think strengths is number one. There's not really always going to be the opportunity to be 100% 50-50, right? One parent might work and the other parent is able to have more flexibility of time to be with the kids. Right. Maybe one is more with the sports and this and that, and the other one is more at home with the kids. I think definitely based off of strengths, because if I am better at, creating structural discipline, but then you're better at influxing that, the vision and teaching them certain things, and then you're better at maybe teaching them more physical discipline, and I'm more educational, or vice versa.
Okay.
I think there's strengths in everything,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's better when we all play to our strengths, because we ultimately want our kids to be the best of us, right? And so I want to be able to give what I feel like I'm the best at, you give what you're the best at, and then they have the best of both worlds, rather than me trying to give them something that I'm not as great at, and I'm struggling to kind of fill in the gaps of it. And I know sometimes you don't really have that opportunity if you're a single parent, but just talking about this 50-50 parenting, what do you think is your perspective on that?
I think ultimately, everybody wants to produce, usually what they want out of their children. But ultimately, I believe that you reproduce what you are.
Yes, that's so good.
So
yeah, that's really good. What they want versus what they are.
Yeah, so I obviously I want my kids to be disciplined, right? But if I'm not disciplined, it's kind of hard to reproduce someone that's going to be disciplined.
Yeah.
Because children's going to look at me and say, well, why you keep telling me to be disciplined on this, but I'm looking at you.
Right.
And more is caught than taught. And, the reality is that your kids are going to hear you, and they're going to obviously abide and listen to you because you have that authority over them and out of respect. But ultimately, they're watching you saying, you don't do what you keep telling me to do.
Exactly.
So you can see that fall in line. It's interesting because there's things, we all want the strengths going to our kid, but I see a lot of weaknesses in my kids. I'm like, of me. I'm like, oh man, like, you have it honest. Like, I can't even get mad sometimes when they do stuff, because I'm like, I do that, I even feel bad sometimes when I yell at the kids, or like, you didn't do this, but I'm like, I don't even do that. I never did that. I've been yelled at for the last 40 years. You get what I'm saying? So my point is that yes, everybody wants their strength to be duplicated, but the reality is that ultimately, most of the time, your weaknesses are really going to be duplicated more than anything.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is the thing about that I think. Because, for example, I grew up with a single mom.
Okay.
And I grew up where my mom worked multiple jobs. And so, obviously we lived not like we were live filthy or anything like that. Our house was always clean and that kind of stuff. But when it came to like our rooms, that kind of thing, it wasn't like the super like most important thing, right? It was one of those things where it's like she had all this on her plate and she's just like, close your door, like, and my mom did not like our house to be messy. We knew the kitchen, all these things had to be clean, but our rooms, our own laundry, that was like, you live how you gonna live in that room, okay? And so I know that I didn't create the best habits of like a routine of like doing my laundry, or like I would just let it pile up until it was like, I have nothing else to wear. Okay, now I have to do laundry, that kind of a thing. And so it became habits that as an adult, I had to really deconstruct and try to like give myself those things. So it was more difficult. Every time I became overwhelmed in my life, you could tell because you could start to see it in my space first, right? That's where it would be first, because that was not an innate thing for me. It was something that I had to like push myself to do. So it was one of the first things that would fall off. It's like, oh crap, my laundry's piling up. Oh, I'm not making my bed every day. Oh, I'm, leaving stuff on, like I take my clothes off and they're left on the chair, that kind of a thing. And so for me, as I started to get on our kids about these certain things, I had to be honest and tell them. I said, hey, I had a conversation with Madison Page. I said, hey, let me be really clear with you. Like, there are times that I'm telling you, clean up your room. Why does your room look like this? And my laundry hasn't been done. And I don't want you to look at me and think like, oh, you're just a hypocrite. And if you didn't do it, why do I have to do it? Like, I'm going to be very honest with you. This is structure that I didn't have growing up, that I wish that I did have, that I wish that somebody was on me about when I was your age, because now I wouldn't be in my 30s, or my 20s, whatever it was at the time, trying to like continue to get a hold of this. Right. And so I think sometimes it's just good for us to have those conversations, because I had that conversation with Maddie. I'm like, listen, there's so many things when you become an adult that you have to think about and you have to learn and get better at and fix and all these things. And if you already have a baseline of like cleanliness structure, then you don't even have to worry about that part because it just happens innately. You know, and like I think about that, like if it's embedded into your nervous system, because like my grandmother today, she has Alzheimer's dementia, but to this day she's walking around in people's rooms in her nursing home and she's cleaning their room and making their bed and she's folding their clothes and putting them in their drawers.
Part of her core.
It's a part of her core innate thing. And I watched her do that and I'm like, wow, I don't have that. It's something I have to push myself to do, you know. And so I want my kids to have what my grandmother has. You know. And so I think sometimes if we don't have those things as strengths, that it's important for us to at least have the conversation with our kids about, hey, this is something and this is why I think it's important for you to catch this now, because now I feel like our kids are a little bit more on top of it than me always having to say, hey, you know. And I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's huge. I think the point is that even if you did it or you did not do it, is to have the conversation of the consequences if you didn't.
Yes.
You know, so you're having the conversation on, look, don't use me as the example, or I did give you an example. If you don't do it, you'll still be my age, trying to retract. And
for the record, I keep my laundry done in bed made now. It took some time, but I got there, okay?
Ooh, gosh, yes.
Stop.
I think this one's washed. I think we'll be okay. All right, I think this one's washed.
We're on the track now.
I'll play. All right, cool. I took some big value on that one, because I think a lot of people think I have to be something, again, like I mentioned, to reproduce something, but it doesn't mean that person that you're training, you're developing, which is your child, can't see the example in both ways and make their decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're giving them that opportunity to mature in that
because
regard.
You know what's so good about what you just said is that either way, we're an example.
Yes.
And so sometimes we only want to give our kids the right example, and we only want to think that we do everything right. Right?
Or you're going to try to at least show that you're doing the right thing.
Right. But sometimes there's just as much of a lesson in the like, I got this and let me teach you how I got this.
Yeah.
There's just as much of a lesson in, I didn't do this right. And look at the consequences that I had to go through. I want you to have to skip those consequences so you can do this instead.
That's so big, because I remember when I was growing up, my mom, you know, I'm young, you know, I'm playing sports, you know, my popularity is growing, you know, I'm getting a lot of, you know, attraction from girls now and all these different stuff, right? So I remember my mom, she's like, you're handsome, you know, a lot of people are going to start approaching you, you're going to want, you know, your hormones are changing, all these different stuff, you're 14, 15, and I remembered her to this day, show me a book, all right, of what would happen if I started to go out and do things like such as sex and things like that a little too early and get undisciplined with it. STDs, all this. You start breaking down all the bad examples of those that made mistakes in that. So that when I was out at parties or I was out and people were out, I was like, oh no, I can't do that, because the bad example automatically popped in my head. Right? It kept me aligned. So I can understand that in regards to what you're mentioning, is that you can give your child both ways so they can understand what they're really doing in the decisioning.
Yeah.
I'll give you a really terrible example.
No, that's a good one, but it's so funny. It just brought me to my memory. So my older sister, Autumn, she used to tell me that if you kiss boys outside of marriage, that you get gingivitis. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, your teeth bleed. It's awful. And I was young enough that I actually believed her. Yeah. And so it was a core belief as I started to get older, because our oldest sister, she got pregnant with my nephew when she was 15 years old.
Oh, you saw that.
So my other sister was like, we're not doing that. We don't even kiss boys, kind of thing. So I was like 8 or 9 years old when she told me this, and I really believed her. And I didn't have my first kiss till I was 18 years old, and I was stressed. After I had my first. I was like, oh God, my teeth are gonna bleed and fall out.
You're out there macking.
Hot mess. The things you believe when you're a child. Shout out to you, Autumn, though. You kept me out these streets.
Oh, Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's go to question number 2. So I have another one for you guys, and really for you, is can a couple still succeed, all right, as parents, even if their relationship is failing?
Yes, I definitely think so.
Co-parenting, okay.
Co-parenting, I think, is the most important thing, especially if you have a keep the kids first mentality.
Oh,
Right? Like, okay, for
okay.
example, this isn't an example that we have in our relationship. But for example, my sister and I, we had some ups and downs. My oldest sister and I,
Okay.
we had some ups and downs in our relationship at one point, but we always had the same page of like, whether we're not talking or we're talking or whatever the circumstances are between us, we keep the kids out of it. Like, the kids don't need to know any of the situation. The
I agree.
kids go to your house, the kids come to my house, the whole thing. And so I think that's a good example of like, yeah, you got to keep the kids first. Because I think sometimes as adults, people don't realize that they start to use the kids as weapons. And it's
Ooh.
like, and that's one thing that as I grew up, I always respected my mom for, is that she never turned me against my dad or made me feel bad for loving him, or tried to weaponize,
That's
the
good. That's
relationship,
good.
even though their relationship wasn't working.
Yeah.
And there were times where my mom and dad were not even on speaking terms. Like, she
Yeah.
couldn't even be in the same room as him, but always that was like the relationship of like, they always spoke about me, about my needs, and how they could communicate specifically about bettering me and my situation and my future. So I think that's a great example of that, is just letting your stuff go and saying, hey, we don't want to affect the kids. Like, let's be on let's like really serious only talk about the kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
your position, my position, and how we can move forward with them,
Yeah.
so that they don't end up becoming a part of like a tragedy of the war that might be going on between the relationship.
That's so good because I think it ultimately comes down to maturity
Yeah.
and really understanding that you created something.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're obviously both of you guys want a return on your investment of what you created. You want the
Right.
best thing for what you created. So if you, again, I like that. If you put your kid first over the relationship, if the relationship is failing. Now, if we're talking about, obviously there's some dynamic structure of a relationship. Your relationship goes first. But if it's failing, make sure your kid is not affected by what's failing between both of you guys. I think that's really
Right.
cool.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we have different perspective of relationship and raising kids and discipline, because I think discipline becomes something that is a constant with raising children. And it's always a topic that comes up that people have disagreements on, and sometimes in relationship. And so this is something I want us to speak to specifically because you came into the relationship with me already having two kids, right?
Yeah.
And so we have that dynamic of that blended family, learning, how to discipline and all those things. So does a step parent, how do they discipline the kids? What would you say is the most important things to keep in mind, or the best way to navigate blended families when it comes to discipline?
I think a lot of people, especially when they step into authoritative position as a father or the mother, they want respect so quickly from the child. So they try to use power. What should I say? They try to use force versus using power. So, in my opinion, I can't discipline you if you don't respect or love me first, because you don't even receive my discipline, and so now all I'm going to do is create resentment. All right, so I don't want resentment. I want to make sure there's respect and again there's love. So what I'm going to do first is create a relationship, so there's love. So if there's a challenge, that it's out of love, not out of just trying to tell you what to do or try to replace somebody that you love. Maybe I was replacing your father or replacing your mother. I'm not trying to replace somebody, right? I'm trying to build our own relationship. And once you understand that whoever stepping into that slot now is trying to create the relationship with that child, and that child understands it's authentic,
Yeah.
not just like, hey, I'm just trying to again replace, then I don't think you're going to have an issue with discipline. All right, that was my take on it. That's why I don't think we've ever had an issue with that, is because we came with let's build our relationship first, and then once there's love, you respect, once there's love and respect, now if there's a challenge, now if there's something I need to correct on, you're going to receive it because you know it's coming out of the right place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I think for me, watching you discipline first watching you build that loving relationship was important for me to let go of the reins when you were doing discipline. Because I think for the biological parent, it's a sensitivity of like, do you love my kid?
Of course.
Are you trying to enforce or force, the whole power versus force? That's a great book, by the way, if you haven't read it, Power versus Force. But are you trying to force versus power? What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
And you can become very sensitive. And so I had to make a very early decision because I've seen people in my family, lots of blended families. I've seen it go right and I've seen it go wrong.
We all have,
and
for sure.
For me, it felt like if this is my person and I trust this person and I know that they love me and I know they love my kid, then I have to allow them to establish their own. Because if I step in every time you discipline, then all of a sudden the kid is never going to respect you and your word and what you have to say.
Yep.
So that also was very hard for me in the beginning to see you discipline. It wasn't like you were spanking them or anything like that, but just to be stern. And I was like, oh, my baby girls, But at the same time, I knew how important that was for the foundation of the building blocks of the relationship and for them to ultimately today be the like biggest daddy's girls and like, run and jump into your arms and they come process things with you before they even come to me sometimes. So I think that's a really important thing. So I'm really proud of us with how we were super young, like navigating that.
Yeah.
and I have to give you props. I remember one time Maddie was really young and we were really fresh in our relationship. And I remember her looking at you and saying, "You're not my daddy." And I was like trying to be over here, but I was definitely listening for what were you going to say next? How were you going to respond?
Right.
And you said exactly what you just said today. You said, you have a father and you should love your dad. I'm not trying to take the place of your dad. I just want to be your friend. I just want to build our own relationship. Is that okay? And she said, oh, okay. When she didn't feel that threat of like, oh, you're taking over this place, I think it also gave her more of gave her the confidence to be able to build something new.
Yeah. I like that. There was no threat. What's the threat for?
Exactly.
They get their own relationship. We're going to have our own relationship the same way that we have our own relationship.
Exactly.
There's no threat at all. It's all love. So
exactly. So what do you do if there's one parent that wants to discipline with spankings and the other one is no, Bobby. Oh, no, Bobby. I said no, Bobby.
That's a conversation that needs to be had before you guys enter a relationship,
right?
As a parents, because now you're kind of got to retract and rehab a whole house now in essence, right? Because you didn't make sure the piping was legit before you even bought the house.
Yeah.
As an example, so. I think you're going to run into some major problems if, for example, you want to spank or you believe, you want to pop them with a belt real quick or whatever that may be, as an example. And I'm like, we don't do that. You don't touch the children that way. Use your words. So you believe words versus, a stern hand sometimes. We're going to have an issue.
Yes.
We're eventually going to run into a major problem. And then at what level deserves a spanking? At what level deserves anything other than words,
right?
So if the parents have to come down to that agreement, almost like if we were running a business, what is the grounds of termination here?
Right.
In essence, like, what is that? If someone does sexual harassment, are they terminated? If someone loses integrity, you got to be very clear on what is the black and white of this and what are, some things that could be acceptable or gray areas. In that relationship of how you're going to discipline, because there's no right answer for that, in my opinion. Because if you're not clear on that, if you're not in an agreement on that, if I spank and you don't want me to spank, now we have issues.
Yes.
So it's not now the parenting situation.
Now
relationship
yes.
issue now. So if your guys are not clear on that up front, or sit down and have the conversation, and then also get the understanding of why does someone believe in that philosophy or why they don't.
Exactly.
You know, like, did you come from a house that spanked? How did that work? You know, when was it too excessive? When, you know, did it, no one spank and everyone just took words and no one did anything anyway? Like, what was it?
Yeah.
You know, because I believe some kids can handle words. Like, I'll use my example. Like, I remember I was in junior high, and I remember this. I had a weak moment. Okay, I'm like in fifth grade, fourth grade. All right, and they used to do pizzas on Friday. And it used to be $1 for pizza, right? Whatever it is, man. I love that to come back. $1 for pizza? That'd be crazy. All right. Anyways, so it was $1 for pizza, and I remember that one day, like, my parents forgot to give me $1, and I was so hungry. I was looking, and there was a box. You know, there was this. It was an integrity thing. Like, they'd let you just go and pick up a pizza, but only if you paid. But they never checked. And I remember grabbing one of the slices of pizza because I was so hungry, and I ate it. Right. And right when I ate it, I felt bad. And I was like, oh, it's okay. Right. You know how you try to, like, wash them.
Yeah.
It's okay. You know, like, it'll be all right.
One slice.
This is like one slice, nothing big deal. Right. And then I remember at the end of lunch, this one girl was crying. And the teacher was, you know, saying, who ate her pizza? She paid for a pizza. And she doesn't have her pizza. And I remember feeling crushed.
Oh.
I was like, oh. It was me. And I had to go apologize to her. And I remember that feeling. Like, I was like, dang, for my own selfish act, I hurt you. But I had no clue it was going to affect you.
Yeah.
But the consequence was that. But ultimately, I go home. My mom finds out. All right. So I go home now. And, you know, the teacher tells what happened. And she's like, so that's the reputation you want? And so she says, I can't wait till your dad gets home. All right. I'm like, oh, shoot. So he comes home. He takes out the bell. You know, he gives me a whooping real quick. And I remember the feeling of that. And I was like, I don't like this type of pain. I don't. Like, and since that day, I've never been in trouble ever again. Because I was like, if I do something, the consequence is this pain. I don't like this pain, so don't do anything that causes this pain.
Right.
That's my process, right? So I was like, ever since that, you can ask my parents, never been in trouble, never had no issues, never been anything along those lines since that day.
Not in trouble to get a spanking, but you had some trouble. I'm sure you did.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like, having, like, a discipline issue where it was like, hey, you need to, you know, unfortunately get spanking on that. So my point is that since that day, I never had an issue because of that.
Right.
Because I was able to have that feeling early. And it really depends on the child.
I was just going to say.
Because, you know, some children, like from your example, they never had to spank me ever again. But, hey, my sister, shout out to you. I saw you get some. I saw you didn't need one. You needed a couple to get you where you're at today. You know, some kids need some more. You know, they need some more love in that category. You know, so I really depends on, again,
the kid,
the child.
You know, I think that's such a good point too, though, because you also do need to kind of look at your children, not just your philosophy. Because, like, in our house, we have a couple that definitely need that good butt reminder every now and then. But then we have a one or two that are like, they don't, like, just saying I'm disappointed in you is just the most crushing. You could see it. That if I were to spank you right now, that would crush you to a depth that is just not even necessary.
Not even appropriate.
So it does matter the child, because then we have some kids who are like, I could care less what you say. Like, if you're like, not, my kids are not bad. Don't think we're saying it like that. But it's like, some of it's like, I'm going to tell you this and I'm disappointed. It's like,
the words don't have enough weight. The words are not enough weight.
It's not enough weight. Right. They have to feel that. And then they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, let me get back on track. Let me listen to you. So I think it does depend on the personality of the child. But if you're in that situation where you do have disagreement on if you're how you discipline, obviously, like you said, you have to communicate. But I also would encourage, if you're already in that situation, is everybody has to be willing to compromise a little bit for you to find your third option way of how you do things. So maybe I believe in spankings, you don't believe in spankings. Maybe we go no spankings until this line is crossed. Maybe we go X, Y, and Z, you know, so then that way everybody feels heard and like they have a place. So I think that's awesome.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So I think we're wrapping up on our time right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have 3 more.
We never get through all the topics.
Man, we got 3 more segments we really need to really talk about right now. But I think we're going to do part 2 on this one.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So I'm excited for you because the next one we're going to talk about is like arguing in front of your kids. Is that healthy? We're going to talk about should one parent's career aspirations take precedence, over the benefit of family. We'll talk about staying together just for the kids. You know how people stay together? Oh man, we're going to stay together until you're 18, right? So they fake the relationship.
Yeah.
But then they create.
Let's see. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it.
We got a lot of cool stuff to talk about with you, but go ahead and close this out.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for being here with us today. As usual, we're so grateful for this opportunity to come before you guys and, just reminding everybody that you're all special. We all have something that is inside of us that is important, right? And so take that endangered part of yourself out because, we want you to understand that, it's constantly in this like crazy changing world, all the like with craziness with the families and all these things, it's important for us to understand our values and our principles as leaders and as endangered species is important, and our survival is just as important. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.